Our topic is the crisis starting from Greece and what can we do. To see what needs to be done, we must first see where we are at. This is why my approach of the Greek crisis starts from a global vision. 2008 to 2015, 7 years of crisis. What happened in between and where are we now? If we take a look at the data, we will realize that the situation is now worse than in 2008, contrary to what is officially maintained as regards the safety of the financial system. And in essence, there's no recovery. The rates are very low and they are mostly due to the expansion of the financial system and money channeled to the markets. This recovery has not led to an increase of jobs. Unemployment in the US and Europe has only slightly dropped, and a large percentage of manpower is either not employed at all or partly employed. Also, debts have been increased, both private and public debts globally. This means that there are serious problems and obstacles to any efforts for recovery. Also, the political system has been severely damaged. This is evident in Europe. Corruption, scandals break out every day. There is a lack of trust on behalf of people in the system. Geopolitical relations have also changed. Conflicts are multiplying and are deeper. And maybe things will get out of control. The only thing that has recovered during these 7 years is the markets. I'm talking about the bubble of markets. There is a huge bubble called bonds market. In 30 years, there have been no corrections therein. And there is the bubble of shares. The figures there are incredible, but I will not refer to them. And this is the material used to judge the Greek crisis and the situation in Europe. I'm referring to all of these because, of course, the problem lies in the very beginning, the establishment of the Eurozone and the unequal distribution of burdens between peripheral countries in Europe and northern European countries. But also the problem lies with the method applied, which is neoliberal policies. So why is it that people insist on neoliberal policies, even though that throughout the crisis they have not produced anything? The global economy is not in a good shape. Debts are continuously rising, although fiscal policies under neoliberalism were meant to reduce them. Historically, we've seen that two things are essential: profitability and demand. This is what it takes to move the system. If someone cannot gain profit, then they will not invest. I believe Mr. Arsenis said earlier that This is a very important factor. Policies applied involving salary cuts, pension cuts, welfare cuts are policies aimed at improving profitability. That means that they are class policies. Therefore, they do not consider debts, they do not consider that society is suffering, and they do not consider political balances that must be in place in order for the system to operate in a rational way. Therefore, this is not a matter of ideology. It is also a political matter. For example, we now have, for the first time, a left government in Europe. This is a bad example. This is something that must not be imitated in Europe. But also capitalism is going through a crisis not just in Europe, but globally. Therefore, we must realize that any reply given to Greece, any response given to Greece as regards the agreement or rupture will be based on an overall concept. I believe that the systemic risk is much higher than what it used to be. For example, in 2008, Lehman Brothers were exposed and collapsed. They were exposed at 32 billion. Deutsche Bank is currently exposed at 67 billion. This shows that the foundations are shaking, the foundations of both the political and economical system in Europe. Before the elections, I wrote that the systemic risk is that high that Tsipras and Syriza are now in a position to bargain and gain something positive for Greece. Therefore, we should not be afraid of a Brexit. But if the financial situation as estimated in Europe is in a place where it is only a matter of time for the bubble to burst, then no one can exclude that Greece could actually be led to a Brexit. Greece is an economy that is relatively closed. It structurally depends on Europe, and during the crisis, its extroversy increased by 10 percentage units. Greece has been living off European resources for the past 20 years, and this is one of the major issues that led to corruption in Greece and scandals, and also led to the inability of the political system to tackle the crisis. Also, our economy lacks in production and exports. We have also estimated that the country will not be led outside the monetary union normally and following a consensus. There will be no mutual understanding, there will be no consensual divorce, because this would mean that the country would be a bad role model for other countries to imitate. Also, the euro, the currency, will have suffered a great damage. Therefore, this is something that cannot be tolerated, and this is why efforts are made within the boundaries set by creditors to reach an agreement and keep Greece in the Eurozone. On the other hand, our government has specified red lines. One of its objectives is to reduce austerity, not eliminate austerity, but reduce austerity. But unless it actually performs this, it will not be able to continue because it will not enjoy social support. If the country leaves the Eurozone, what will this mean for the European Union? If the systemic risk is, as I described, without giving any specific figures, then the European Union runs the risk of disintegration, of collapse. On the other hand, if the cohesion is sufficient in order to prevent collapse, then the European integration will be further enhanced. That means that different methods will be applied in a unified Europe. But this is not the case right now. Maybe if Greece leaves the Eurozone, the European Union will become more and more coherent. But again, Brexit may lead to the collapse of the European Union, which means that we will see something similar to the interwar period, because a disintegrated European Union will imply the return to competitive nationalistic policies of devaluations, and eventually the trade and currency war will turn into a military war. Moreover, Europe, after the war, has depended on the US. At the beginning, it was a US satellite. Now Europe seems to be following an autonomous policy. We do not know whether Europe will succeed in this, but it is hopeful that when you have a unified European Union, you will be able to prevent a conflict between the US and Russia, which I believe is likely to occur. But you will not be able to prevent such a conflict if things continue in the path followed at the moment. We've seen the example of Ukraine. We've seen the wrong choices there. I don't know whether Europe wants to disengage from events in the Ukraine, but since Europe has traditionally been dependent on the US, I believe it is in the interest of Europe to have an autonomous role and dynamics. As for Greece, I would like to confirm what Mr. Arsenis said earlier, that the major problem, apart from the financial one, is the problem of oligarchy. We have oligarchs that manipulate all mechanisms of political and economic power. This oligarchy grew in the previous decades and is now a major obstacle to growth. In order for Greece to recover, it will need assistance, financial assistance, a debt haircut on behalf of Europe, and in my opinion, the most important thing of all, it will need assistance for creating jobs and promoting employment. If these things could actually be applied throughout Europe, they could be the solution for the entire European Union. Thank you.